The market street was loud, crowded, and indifferent. Voices clashed, coins clinked, merchants shouted over each other, and people moved like a constant tide, buying, bargaining, leaving, never stopping long enough to notice anything that didn't demand attention. And in the far corner of that busy street, half hidden behind a crooked wooden stall, sat something most chose not to see. A dragon. Not the towering, fire-breathing kind that stories warned about. This one was small, thin, quiet. Its dull green scales lacked the shine of health. Its wings hung weakly at its sides, and its eyes, once probably bright, were now tired, hollow, and far older than they should have been. In front of it lay a small cloth, and on that cloth, handmade toys, tiny wooden carvings, animals, birds, little figures, simple but crafted with care. Each one carried delicate details, precise lines, and an unmistakable sense of effort. But no one stopped. Not really. A few glanced. Some smirked. Others avoided eye contact entirely. "Look at that thing," someone muttered as they passed. "Probably cursed," another whispered. Who would buy toys from a dragon? The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The dragon heard them anyway. It always did. Still, it didn't leave, because it had nowhere else to go. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the noise, not loud, but different, calm, curious. The dragon looked up slowly. A human stood there, mid-30s, simple clothes, a travel-worn bag slung over one shoulder. Nothing particularly remarkable at first glance, except for one thing. He wasn't looking away. He was looking at the toys, carefully, genuinely. "How much for this one?" the human asked, picking up a small wooden bird. The dragon blinked, once, twice, as if trying to process what had just happened. "You want to buy?" it asked quietly, its voice rough from disuse. The human glanced up, surprised. "Well, yeah," he said. "It's good work." Silence. The dragon's claws tightened slightly against the ground. "No one buys," it admitted. The human frowned slightly. "That's their loss," he said simply. "So? Price?" The dragon hesitated, then gave a number so small it almost felt like an apology. The human didn't bargain, didn't question it. He reached into his pocket, placed the coins gently on the cloth, and tucked the toy bird into his bag. "Thanks," he said, and turned to leave. The dragon stared after him, confused. Then, "Wait." The word came out before it could stop itself. The human paused, turned back. "Yes." The dragon hesitated again, something unfamiliar twisting in its chest. "Why?" it asked. The human tilted his head. "Why what? Why buy?" The question hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. The human looked at the toys again, then at the dragon. And this time, he saw more. The thin frame, the worn claws, the way it sat slightly hunched, as if trying to take up less space in a world that already ignored it. "Because they're good," he said. "And because someone made them." The dragon didn't respond, didn't know how. The human smiled faintly. "I'll be back tomorrow," he added, "if that's okay." And then he left. For real this time. The dragon watched until he disappeared into the crowd, then slowly looked down at the coins in front of it. It didn't feel like much, but it felt like something new, something it hadn't felt in a long time. That night, under a broken rooftop on the edge of the city, the dragon didn't sleep much, not because of hunger, not because of cold, but because of a single thought it couldn't shake. Someone came back. The next day it returned to the same spot, same cloth, same toys, but this time it sat a little straighter and waited. Hours passed. The crowd came and went. The usual whispers followed. But the dragon didn't leave. Not this time, because it was waiting. And then, "Hey!" The voice again. The dragon looked up instantly. The human stood there just like before. Same bag, same calm expression. But now, he was smiling. "You're still here," he said. The dragon nodded slowly. "You came back." "Told you I would," the human replied. This time, he didn't just pick one toy. He looked at all of them, asked questions. How do you carve these? How long does this take? Did you teach yourself? At first, the dragon answered in short, hesitant words. But as the conversation went on, something shifted. Its voice grew steadier, less afraid, more alive. My mother taught me, it said at one point, then quickly looked down as if it had said too much. The human didn't push. He just nodded. She must have been good, he said. The dragon was quiet for a long moment. She was, it said softly. The human bought more toys that day, and the next, and the next. But something else changed too. People started noticing. First, just curiosity. Why is that human always at that stall? Then interest. If he's buying, maybe it's worth something. Then, slowly, customers. Not many, but enough. Enough to matter. The dragon didn't understand it at first. Didn't trust it. But the human, who eventually introduced himself as Daniel, just smiled. Sometimes, he said, people need someone else to go first. Days turned into weeks. The stall improved. The cloth was replaced with a sturdier surface. The toys became more refined, more detailed, more confident, just like the one making them. And the dragon changed too. The dullness in its scales began to fade. His posture straightened. Its eyes, once empty, now held something new. Not just survival, but purpose. One evening, as the market closed and the last of the customers drifted away, the dragon looked at Daniel. You didn't have to do this, it said. Daniel shrugged. Didn't do much, he replied. You did the work. The dragon shook its head slightly. No, it said. You saw me. Daniel didn't answer right away, because he knew that mattered more than anything else he could say. After a moment, he smiled. Yeah, he said. I guess I did. The dragon looked down at its toys, then back at the market, at the people, at the life it had thought was forever out of reach. And for the first time, it didn't feel invisible anymore. Sometimes, changing fate doesn't mean grand battles or impossible strength. Sometimes, it starts with something as simple as stopping at a quiet stall and choosing to see someone the rest of the world ignored. Dragon. The change didn't happen overnight, but once it started, it refused to stop. Daniel's quiet decision to return each day had set something in motion that neither he nor the small abandoned dragon had fully expected. At first, it was just a few curious glances, then hesitant steps toward the stall, then the occasional question asked not with mockery, but with genuine interest. The market, once indifferent and dismissive, began to shift ever so slightly, like a tide turning without anyone noticing the exact moment it began. And in the center of it all sat the dragon, no longer completely invisible, but not yet fully accepted either, caught somewhere between doubt and something that almost felt like hope. Do you have more like this? A woman asked one morning, picking up a small carved fox. The dragon froze for just a moment, clearly unprepared for the question. Its claws tightened slightly around the edge of the stall before it answered. I can make more, it said carefully. The woman nodded, placing a few coins down before leaving with the toy. The dragon stared at the empty space where the fox had been. Another sale. Not because of pity. Not because someone was trying to make a point. But because someone actually wanted what it had made. You see, Daniel said from the side, leaning casually against a nearby post. Told you. The dragon glanced at him. I don't understand, it admitted quietly. Why now? Daniel shrugged lightly. People follow patterns, he said. They trust what others trust. Once something stops looking strange, it starts looking normal. The dragon looked down at its claws. I've always been strange, it murmured. Daniel shook his head. No, he said. You've just been alone. The words lingered longer than either of them expected. That day, the dragon worked harder than ever. It didn't just carve, it focused. Every line became sharper, every detail more intentional. It stayed late, long after most of the market had closed, refining its work under the fading light until its claws ached and its wings drooped with exhaustion. But it didn't stop. Not this time. Because now, there was a reason not to. Over the next few days, the stall began to transform. Daniel helped where he could, not by taking over but by supporting. He brought better tools, showed the dragon how to sand the wood more smoothly, how to polish the finished pieces so they caught the light just right. He even fixed the crooked legs of the stall itself, reinforcing it so it no longer wobbled with every movement. "You're not just selling toys," he said one afternoon while adjusting a support beam. "You're building something. Might as well make it solid." The dragon watched him quietly. "Why are you helping me?" it asked again. Daniel paused, then smiled faintly. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago," he said. The dragon didn't respond, but something in its expression softened. For the first time, it didn't feel like a question that needed an answer. It felt like something it was beginning to understand. The real change, however, came a week later. A merchant, well-dressed, sharp-eyed, and clearly more interested in profit than kindness, stopped at the stall and picked up one of the dragon's carvings. He examined it closely, turned it over in his hands, then glanced at the dragon. "You made this?" he asked. The dragon nodded slowly. "Yes." The merchant hummed thoughtfully. "How many can you make in a day?" The question sent a ripple of unease through the air. Daniel straightened slightly. The dragon hesitated. "I don't know," it admitted. The merchant smiled, not warmly, but calculatingly. "I could sell these," he said, "in larger markets, bigger cities. You'd earn far more than this little corner stall." The dragon's eyes flickered, hope and uncertainty colliding at once. "Really?" it asked. "Of course," the merchant replied smoothly. "But I'd need consistency, quantity. You'd work for me, produce what I ask, and I'd handle the rest." Daniel stepped forward slightly. "And what would he get?" he asked calmly. The merchant barely glanced at him. "A fair cut," he said dismissively. "More than he's making now, I'm sure." The dragon looked between them, conflicted. It didn't understand the full weight of the offer, but it understood enough to know this could change everything. No more struggling for small sales. No more waiting for customers. A steady income. A future. "I don't know," it said quietly. The merchant's smile tightened slightly. "You won't get many opportunities like this," he said. "Think carefully." Daniel didn't interrupt this time. He just watched, because he knew this choice mattered. The dragon looked down at its claws, then at the toys on the table, then at Daniel. "What do you think?" it asked. Daniel met its gaze evenly. "I think," he said slowly, "that you finally have something that's yours." The dragon blinked. "And I think," Daniel continued, "you should be careful about who you give control of that to." Silence. The merchant sighed impatiently. "Well," the dragon took a slow breath. Something inside it, something new, something fragile but growing, tightened. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel desperate. It didn't feel like it had to grab the first chance offered. Because now, it had options. And that changed everything. "No," the dragon said quietly. The merchant blinked. "I'm sorry." The dragon lifted its head slightly. "I said no," it repeated a little stronger this time. "These are mine. I want to sell them myself." The merchant's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake," he said flatly. "Maybe," the dragon replied, "but it will be my mistake." For a moment, the tension hung thick in the air. Then the merchant scoffed, tossing the carving back onto the stall. "Suit yourself," he muttered before turning and disappearing into the crowd. The dragon exhaled slowly. Its heart, if it could be called that, pounded in its chest. "Did I do the right thing?" it asked quietly. Daniel smiled. "Yeah," he said. "You did." The dragon looked at its toys again, at the stall, at the space it had built with its own claws. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something temporary. Felt like a beginning, a real one. Dragon. The market didn't forget what happened that day. Word spread faster than the dragon expected. Not just that it made beautiful carvings, but that it had turned down a wealthy merchant's offer. Some admired it, Others thought it was foolish. A few laughed, whispering that the little dragon would regret it soon enough. But for the first time, those whispers didn't cut as deeply. Because now, they weren't the only voices anymore. "You're the one who said no, right?" a young boy asked one morning, peering curiously over the edge of the stall. The dragon hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." The boy grinned. "That was brave." The dragon blinked in surprise. Brave. No one had ever used that word for it before. It didn't know what to say, so it simply handed the boy a small carved turtle. "This one's slow," the dragon said softly, "but it keeps going." The boy beamed, placing his coins down proudly before running off. Daniel watched from the side, arms folded, a quiet smile on his face. "See?" he said. "You're not just selling toys anymore." The dragon tilted its head. "What am I selling?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "Something real," he replied. "People can tell." And they could. There was something different about the stall now. It wasn't just the improved quality of the carvings or the sturdier structure Daniel had helped build. It was the presence behind it. The dragon no longer shrank into the corner, no longer tried to make itself invisible. It still spoke softly, still moved carefully, but there was a quiet confidence growing beneath the surface, like a flame slowly learning how to burn without fear of being extinguished. But growth, real growth, rarely comes without resistance. 3 days after the merchant's visit, the market shifted again. Not with curiosity this time, but tension. Elias had just finished setting up the stall when he noticed it. The subtle change in the crowd, the way conversations dipped lower, eyes flickering toward the same direction. Then he saw them. 2 men, dressed in the colors of the merchant guild. Not the same merchant from before, but connected. Watching, waiting. The dragon noticed them too. His claws tightened slightly against the wood. "They're back," it whispered. Daniel didn't look directly at them. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Figured they might be." The men approached slowly, their expressions neutral but their presence heavy, deliberate. One of them picked up a carving without asking, turning it over in his hand with a critical eye. "Not bad," he said. "You've improved." The dragon didn't respond. The second man stepped closer. "Our employer made you a generous offer," he said. "You declined." The dragon nodded slowly. "I did." The man smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "That wasn't a suggestion," he said. Silence fell around the stall. The nearby chatter faded. People were watching now, waiting. Daniel stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Seems like it was," he said. He said no. The man's eyes flicked to him briefly. "And who are you?" "Customer," Daniel replied. "Friend." The word lingered. Friend. The dragon felt something tighten in its chest again. But this time, it wasn't fear. The man looked back at the dragon. "You don't understand how this works," he said. "Talent like yours doesn't sit in corners. It gets managed." "I manage it," the dragon said quietly. The first man chuckled. "Not anymore." He reached for the stall, grabbing one of the carvings roughly. "That was enough." "No," the dragon said. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. The man paused, slowly turned back. "What did you say?" The dragon lifted its head. Its wings shifted slightly, not in aggression, but in presence. "I said no," it repeated. The air changed. Daniel felt it instantly. So did everyone else watching. This wasn't the same creature that had once sat silently while the world ignored it. This was something else now. Something that had found its voice. The man's expression hardened. "You think a few sales make you important?" he said coldly. "You think anyone here will stand up for you?" The dragon didn't look at the crowd. Didn't need to, because for the first time, it wasn't depending on them. "I don't need to be important," it said. "I just need to be mine." The words hung in the air, clear, unshaken. For a moment, it looked like the situation might turn worse. The man's grip tightened. His posture shifted. Daniel stepped forward another inch, ready. But then, a voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." All heads turned. An older woman stepped forward from the crowd, her presence calm but commanding. She carried one of the dragon's carvings in her hand, the same fox from days earlier. "I bought this," she said. "Fairly." She looked at the men. "And I'll buy more." From him. Another voice joined in. "And me." Then another. "And me too." The crowd shifted, not away this time, but closer, not in fear, but in support. Daniel blinked slightly, then smiled under his breath. "Well," he murmured, "didn't expect that." The two men exchanged a glance. This wasn't what they had planned. Pressure worked best in silence, not in front of a crowd that had suddenly decided to care. The first man set the carving back down. Slowly, deliberately. "This isn't over," he said quietly. The dragon met his gaze. "I know," it replied, and this time, it didn't sound afraid. The men turned and left. The tension broke like a wave receding. The market noise returned, but different now. Lighter, warmer, safer. The dragon stood there for a long moment, as if unsure whether what had just happened was real. "They helped," it said softly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Looks like they did." The dragon looked at the crowd, at the people now browsing its stall, not out of curiosity or doubt, but genuine interest. "Why?" it asked. Daniel smiled. "Because you gave them a reason to," he said. The dragon looked down at its claws again. Then slowly, smiled. Just a little. For the first time. Not out of relief. Not out of survival. But because something inside it had finally changed. It wasn't abandoned anymore. Not really. Dragon. The market did not return to what it had been before. Not for the dragon. And not for the people who had witnessed what unfolded that day. Something subtle but permanent had shifted, like a quiet agreement forming between strangers who had, for once, chosen not to look away. The small corner stall that had once been ignored was no longer hidden at the edge of the street. It had become a place people actively sought out, not because it was unusual, but because it had earned its place among them. And at the center of it all stood the dragon, no longer hunched or hesitant, but steady. Still soft-spoken, still gentle, but no longer uncertain of its right to exist there. The days that followed were busy, far busier than anything the dragon had ever known. Customers came not just to buy, but to talk, to watch, to understand the process behind the carvings. Children lingered longer, fascinated by the careful movements of claw against wood, while adults asked questions about techniques, about time, about the stories behind each piece. The dragon, once uncomfortable under even a single gaze, now found itself speaking more often, explaining its work in quiet but growing confidence. Each word came easier than the last, each interaction building something that went far beyond trade. Daniel remained nearby, though less visibly involved now. He didn't need to stand beside the stall constantly anymore. The dragon didn't need that kind of support. Not in the same way. Instead, he moved through the market like a quiet observer, occasionally stepping in when needed, but mostly watching something he had helped start take on a life of its own. There was a kind of satisfaction in that, not pride exactly, but something steadier. The kind of feeling that came from knowing you had changed something in a way that would last. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the market in warm gold, the dragon carefully packed away its remaining carvings, its movements unhurried for once. It wasn't rushing to make ends meet anymore. It wasn't counting coins with anxious precision. It was simply finishing a day's work. Honest work that had been seen, valued, and respected. Daniel approached quietly, leaning against the now sturdy stall. "You've come a long way," he said. The dragon paused, then looked up at him. "We have," it corrected softly. Daniel smiled faintly but didn't argue. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, watching the last of the crowd drift away. Then the dragon spoke again. "I used to think this was all I would ever be," it said, gesturing lightly to the stall. "Just surviving." Daniel nodded slightly. "Yeah," he said. "A lot of people think that." The dragon's gaze shifted, not to the stall, but beyond it, toward the wider street, the distant buildings, the paths that led out of the market and into a world it had never truly considered before. But now, Daniel asked. The dragon hesitated. Then slowly, now I think this is just the beginning. Daniel let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. Good, he said, because it is. But beginnings often come with choices, and that choice arrived sooner than expected. A week later, a different kind of visitor approached the stall. Not a merchant seeking control, not a customer seeking a simple purchase, but someone who carried themselves with quiet authority. A representative from the artisan guild. Unlike the previous men, there was no arrogance in his posture, no sense of entitlement in his voice. He examined the carvings carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and truly listened, to the dragon's answers. These are exceptional, he said at last. Not just in craftsmanship, but in identity. They carry something unique. The dragon shifted slightly, unsure how to respond. I represent a collective of artisans across several cities, the man continued. We don't control work, we support it. Provide access to better materials, larger markets, safe spaces for creation. Membership is earned. And, he paused briefly, you qualify. Silence settled between them. Daniel, standing off to the side, didn't step in. He didn't need to. This wasn't his decision to influence. The dragon looked at the man. What would I have to give up? It asked quietly. The man smiled faintly. Nothing that is yours, he said. Your work remains yours. Your voice remains yours. We simply help it reach further. The dragon looked down at its claws, at the stall, at everything it had built here, then back up. And if I say no? The man inclined his head slightly. Then you continue exactly as you are, he replied. And we respect that. No pressure, no threat, just a choice, a real one. The dragon took a slow breath. It thought about the past, the cold nights, the empty days, the silence of being unseen. It thought about the present, the stall, the people, the voice it had found. And then, it thought about the future. Not something distant and unreachable anymore, but something open, something it could shape. It looked at Daniel, not for permission, not for guidance, but just to share the moment. Daniel met its gaze and gave a small nod. Whatever you choose, it's yours. The dragon turned back to the man. I'll join, it said. The words felt steady, certain. The man smiled. Then welcome, he said. That night, as the market emptied once more, the dragon stood alone for a while in front of its stall. The same place where it had once sat unnoticed. The same place where everything had begun to change. It reached down and picked up one of its earliest carvings. The small wooden bird Daniel had bought on the very first day. I remember this, it said softly. Daniel stepped closer. Yeah, he said. First sale. The dragon nodded. First time someone saw me. Daniel didn't respond right away, because there wasn't anything to add. After a moment, the dragon carefully placed the carving back on the stall. Not as something to sell, but as something to keep. A reminder. Then it looked out at the road leading away from the market. Not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with something new. Possibility. Will you come with me? It asked. Daniel blinked slightly. Where? The dragon smiled faintly. To wherever this goes next. Daniel considered it for a moment, then shrugged lightly, a familiar grin forming. Yeah, he said. I think I can do that. And just like that, the abandoned dragon who once sold toys in silence began a journey it had never believed it would have. Not because someone saved it, but because someone saw it, and it learned how to see itself. Dragon. The road beyond the market felt different from anything the dragon had ever known. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because for the first time it was chosen. Each step forward was not driven by hunger, fear, or survival, but by something far more powerful. Intention. The small cart Daniel had helped build creaked softly as it rolled along the worn path, filled with carefully packed carvings, tools, and supplies for the journey ahead. The dragon walked beside it, not as a burden, not as something hidden or avoided, but openly. its presence no longer shrinking from the world, but meeting it, one step at a time. The market, once its entire existence, slowly faded into the distance behind them, becoming a memory rather than a boundary. Traveling was not easy. The world beyond the familiar streets held its own uncertainties. Villages that reacted with caution, roads that stretched long and quiet, nights that brought unfamiliar sounds and shifting shadows. But the dragon did not retreat from them. It faced each new place with the same steady resolve it had found within itself. And Daniel remained constant, walking beside it not as a guide leading the way, but as a companion sharing it. "You'll get used to it," he said one evening as they set up camp near a small stream. "The first time you leave something behind, it feels like you're losing it. But really, you're just making space for something bigger." The dragon sat quietly, watching the water ripple under the fading light. "I'm not losing it," it said after a moment. "I'm carrying it." Daniel smiled faintly. Exactly. Their first destination was a town known for its artisan gatherings, a place where craftspeople from different regions came not just to sell, but to learn from one another. The guild representative had spoken of it as an opportunity, a place where the dragon could grow beyond what it had already achieved. But as they approached the town's entrance, the dragon felt a flicker of something old. Uncertainty, hesitation, the memory of being judged before being understood. The gates stood open. People moved freely in and out. And yet, the dragon slowed. Daniel noticed immediately. "Hey," he said gently. "You okay?" The dragon didn't answer right away. "What if they don't accept me?" it asked quietly. Daniel looked ahead at the town, then back at the dragon. "Then they're missing out," he said simply. "Same as the people in the market did at first." The dragon exhaled slowly. "But what if it's different?" Daniel shrugged. "Then you deal with it," he said, "like you did before. Only now you know you can." The dragon stood there for a moment longer. Then, stepped forward, into the town. The reception wasn't what it had feared. It also wasn't immediate acceptance. It was something in between. Curiosity, measured interest. People noticed the dragon. Of course they did. But instead of whispers and avoidance, there were questions, glances filled with thought rather than judgment. The guild had done its part. Word had spread ahead of them. This wasn't an unknown creature intruding into a space. It was an invited artisan, stepping into a larger world. Their stall was placed among others, not at the edge, not hidden, but within the flow of the gathering. And for the first time, the dragon found itself surrounded by creators like itself. Humans, dwarves, and other beings, each with their own craft, their own stories, their own reasons for being there. At first, it observed more than it spoke. It watched how others worked, how they presented their creations, how they spoke about them not just as objects but as expressions of something deeper. And slowly, it began to do the same. A young artisan approached one afternoon, examining one of the dragon's carvings closely. "This is different," she said. "There's emotion in it." The dragon tilted its head slightly. "Isn't there supposed to be?" The artisan smiled. "Not always," she said. "Some people just make things. You feel them." The dragon considered that, then nodded slowly. "I think I do," it said. The days in the town passed quickly, faster than expected. The dragon learned new techniques, experimented with different materials, refined its craft in ways it hadn't imagined before. And with each new creation, it felt something growing, not just skill but identity. It wasn't just surviving anymore. It wasn't just selling. It was creating, and people noticed, not as something unusual, but as something valuable. One evening, as the gathering neared its end, the dragon sat beside the small stream that ran through the town, a familiar kind of quiet settling around it. Daniel joined it, sitting down without a word. "This feels different," the dragon said after a while. Daniel nodded. "Because it is," he replied. The dragon looked at its reflection in the water, clearer now than it had ever been, its scales no longer dull, its posture no longer uncertain. "I'm not the same," it said. "No," Daniel agreed. "You're not." The dragon glanced at him. Neither are you. Daniel laughed softly. Yeah, he said. Guess that's how this works. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had been through, everything they had built, and everything that still lay ahead. The next morning, as the gathering came to a close, the guild representative approached them once more. You've done well, he said. Better than expected. The dragon inclined its head slightly. Thank you. The man studied it for a moment. There are other places, he said. Other cities. Opportunities to grow even further. But that choice, as always, is yours. The dragon looked out at the town, at the people, at the path beyond. Then at Daniel. What do you think? It asked. Daniel leaned back slightly, hands behind his head. I think, he said. You stopped needing my answers a while ago. The dragon smiled faintly. Maybe, it said. Then it looked forward again. Not at what was behind. Not at what was expected. But at what was possible. Let's keep going, it said. And so they did. Not as something broken trying to be fixed. Not as something lost trying to be found. But as something whole. Still growing. Still changing. Still discovering what it could become. The abandoned dragon who once sold toys in silence had become something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Not because fate had changed suddenly, but because step by step, choice by choice, it had changed its own. Dragon,